Welcome back to the Bold Moves podcast. We are so glad that you're with us today. We have Corey Hepler and Kristen Hogue in the house.
Woohoo!
Yes, and the crowd goes wild. This is fantastic. So we are going through a series called Unnecessary Censorship, and we're talking about things that people don't either want to talk about necessarily because it's awkward, or we're talking about the things that people just kind of shy away from talking about because they're uncomfortable. They are awkward moments that you don't really want to think about. And a lot of times they're topics that you don't really think about being awkward or things that you have to censor because they're just kind of out there and they're nebulous. We've been talking about the idea that where you come from, your origin, like that matters. That's something we don't talk about. Like if you believe in God or don't believe in God, that takes you down two very different paths in life. And so we need to talk about that. We talk about having this sense of purpose. And that's where we land in the day. The idea that, man, when we talk about the idea of my life having purpose, again, if you have faith in Jesus, if you believe in God who loves you and has created you in his image, if you believe that you've been made by God and for God, that gives your life purpose. If you don't believe that, truly, your life is completely insignificant. It is meaningless and it is without hope. And that's why I think in our culture, we are surrounded by so many people today who are just completely without hope because God is not part of the equation. And when you're trying to navigate life without God in the picture, it's a completely different experience. And so I want to just kind of circle the importance of purpose, where that comes from, and how we fully engage the purpose in our lives. I want to experience God's purpose for my life. Do you want to experience
100%
God's purpose for your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think that in that context, finding my purpose, it starts with God because that's where we find our purpose. It comes into focus the more that we seek him out in our lives. And I think that we fully see that come to fruition in our lives when we surrender and say, God, all right, it's not life on my own terms. It's not what I want. It's actually what you want. And I'm saying yes. And I think that's when we experience life to the fullest. And that's what God created us for. And I'm curious, what are some of the moments in your life where you were brought to a place of surrender? Because I feel like both of you have been on that journey and you've been walking with Jesus long enough now that there are moments where you say, all right, God's speaking to me. God's calling me to take an uncomfortable step. And I would contend that those are the moments that allow us to lean into the purpose that he created us for.
Sure. So for me, it was in I guess 2017 was the year that I got hired at Crossroads.
Hey, look at that.
Full-time. So I had been working part-time at Crossroads. I worked previously at a different church part-time. And so that was sort of like the pinnacle for me that I had kind of always been aiming for. Like if I can do this in a full-time capacity, then I know that that's like really where I need to be. I wasn't sure if I would want to keep doing if it was part-time. Right? So we got to that point and we were finally there and got the proposal put in front of me, and it was previous executive pastor here at Crossroads who gave that to me, and he basically said, "Here's the numbers," kind of like sheepishly.
wait, name names. Who was it that you were having this conversation?
It was Clark.
Clark, I love Clark. Okay, so Clark's giving you this proposal. Here's what the offer is.
The table,
okay,
take a look at the paper, and he said, "Corey, is that enough for you to make it?"
Oh no!
I said, "Clark, let's do some math really quickly." And we started talking about, no, it's actually not.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
And to Clark's credit and to Crossroads' credit, we made a couple adjustments to make it work out and make it fit. And since then, everything's been good. God always takes care of us.
Added some zeros.
He does.
Yeah. I wish.
Corey's like, do we need to add a zero? We need to add 4 zeros.
$13 a year does not work.
That's amazing. But you saw a progression in your life where you kind of had a dream and God opened those doors for you, and you're realizing that continually being obedient, putting yourself out there, it was a journey, but God brought you where.
And that's how all stories work, right? I mean, you hear people talk about their stories and their testimonies and what it's like to walk alongside Jesus. There's always those moments where you're doing this thing for a while, but it comes to a crossroads.
Yes.
Or it comes to just a right turn in the road. And people talk about those moments as the things that shifted them into their new future and their new purpose. And I just think that's really cool when you start to hear some of those stories.
Well, I think it's great. So to be clear, not all those stories lead to full-time ministry. I mean, actually, very few of them do.
Yeah.
And so, Kristen, I'm curious, what would that look like for you?
Let's be clear.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I would never say that I intentionally tried to work at a church.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Which is very interesting. You found yourself here, right?
Yes. I actually got called from Corey and he was like, let's crunch the numbers here. And I said,
Did he slide you the proposal? You're like, absolutely not.
I was in a moment of desperation, so I was like,
that's
sure,
fantastic.
let's do this.
There it is. There it is.
I would say for me, my moments of surrender, finding purpose, they're just little things along the way that I maybe I was trying to pursue. Like, I don't know how many times I tried to move south. Like, I wanted to live in the South so bad, but it never, ever worked out. Like, it's something always came up, something happened. And finally, it was just, I don't know, that moment, several other moments where God was like, Kristen, you got to stop. Like, you need to stop trying to make your plans. Like, I have a good plan for you.
That's
I have
good.
something secure, something that will give you hope and that will be better than what you're trying to do.
That's good.
So those moments were kind of where I found some purpose or even could just be, I don't want to say a blessing to someone else. Like, just the times that I've given up, I'm like, this is what God has for me. And I could share that with someone else that needed that word.
I think that's a good word in general. I think the learning point there is that we try to dream our own dreams apart from God. And even like the harder we try to pursue those dreams on our own, the more God tries to get our attention and say, hey, cool story, bro. I've got a better one for you over here, right? Like, I don't know that he says cool story, bro. I have no idea where that came from. But it's like, hey, I have something better for you. And I think it's actually believing that and saying, all right, God, I'm going to trust that you have a plan for me that's better. That brings you to the place where you were supposed
to be available.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I think for us, when we got married, I mean, I had told Dana, absolutely, I will never be a pastor. She was actually very nervous about it. She asked me point blank when we were dating, hey, you're not going to be a pastor, are you? I'm like, no. Have you seen pastors? No, I'm not going to be one of those guys. And then God called me unequivocally to be a pastor. And thankfully, she was part of that journey and had the front row seat to all of that and was with me. But the reality is I never saw that because that was never part of my plan. And so being called into ministry, like, that's great. You were like, I pursued this. This was my goal. I was running from that as hard as I could.
Right,
And to be clear, when I got my offer letter for my full-time, I never even asked how much I was making until after we had moved. We made the move from Indiana to Florida, rented the U-Haul, drove it down there. I didn't know how much I was being paid until I got my first paycheck. And I was like, wait, did I only get paid for 1 week instead of 2? What just happened? It was rough. It was rough.
Yes.
So you talk about the leap of faith. Now, just to be clear, every other job I've taken, I've asked that needed to happen. But I mean, when you're following God's purpose for your life, like, he opens the doors, and when you stop fighting him, that's when you start realizing, this is the life I was created for. And again, I'm going to say this: it starts with God, finding my purpose. It comes into focus when you start seeking him, like getting serious about following him. And then I think you live it out. It comes to life when you come to that place of surrender.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we've got a great guest on the podcast today. Kenny Beers is joining us. He's our worship pastor at our St. Pete campus. Yeah. And he's an incredible guy with an incredible story. So 100%. Let's give a warm welcome. Let's give it up for Kenny Beers. We are experiencing 5 good minutes with Kenny Beers. Give it up for Kenny. Kenny, it is great to have you. Hey, I like that. So when Remington is on, he does the piece. What was that you just did, Kenny? It was kind of like
I don't know what that was, actually.
I don't know what that was
when I feel
either.
awkward, I think, maybe.
It's original, and I like it. You keep that up, Kenny. Kenny has been at our St. Pete campus for quite a while now, leading worship and helping us grow our community there. Kenny, we're so glad you're on the team. And
Thanks,
today we're talking about this idea of the reality that when we put our trust in God, our life has purpose. And in reality, our purpose, when we think about like my life having significance, my life actually having meaning, it starts with God. And it continues, like comes into focus as I seek him. And what I've seen over and over in life again is that when I come to that place of surrender, that's when I fully experience like the purpose
Yes.
that God has
Mhm.
created for
Yes.
me. And Kenny, in your journey, I feel like you've gone through those stages of starts with God, seeking out God, and then surrendering. And your story is fantastic. So I would love for you to just tell us about what that has looked like in your journey of finding your purpose and answering God's call in your life, because you've been on quite a journey.
Yeah, thanks. So I would say to kind of get started on it, I will go back to around 2005.
Yeah.
I was a youth sponsor. Let me give you a little more background than that. I'm a rock musician from my past.
Rock
So
musician.
in my 20s, I played in a rock band. We played in bars and clubs, and we toured and we recorded and we had CDs and all that stuff.
Kenny, what was your favorite genre? What was the era of rock band that you guys were jamming to? What was it? Or was it everything?
Punk. We were considered punk. Yeah. So it's a punk.
Punk.
I can see it.
So
Yeah.
he's like the Blink 182 guy.
No.
Yeah.
We actually shared a booth with Blink 182. The Warped Tour.
There it is.
There you go.
There it is. I got you. I
I
got
like-
you.
Actually, we shared a booth with them. Yeah.
That is hilarious.
Kenny,
Okay.
I like how you said you did CDs.
Yes.
I mean, they were
Yes.
a thing. They're
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. And like, let's just talk about that for 30 seconds. Isn't it crazy how that whole world has changed growing up? You have all the
Yeah.
CDs.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. Somebody was talking about how the distractions today for cars are people on their phones. And they're like, yeah, call me back when you're trying to drive and open up your big CD case, trying to find your
Yeah.
CDs.
You flip it down from
find
your
them off the
visor.
floorboard when
Yes.
they're like rolling around the floorboard.
Yes.
and start
Yeah.
picking them
Call
up.
me back when you're dealing with that.
You know how much time I spent like burning like mixed CDs?
Yes. I
that
remember those days.
5 years ago or whatever. I just threw them all in
Yes.
the trash.
So sorry,
Oh,
Kenny,
good.
those CDs are obsolete now. We all recognize that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
I
bring
still
any of
have
us
them in my
joy.
garage. I still have them.
There you go. Yep.
Okay, so it's 2005. You're touring with Blink 182 or something like that. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So I was doing that, and then I'd go to my church, which is a church called Inglewood Christian Church in
Okay.
Jacksonville.
Yep.
I would go, and they always kind of like, "Hey, you're really good with youth. You know, you fit in with our young adults here.
Sure.
Why don't you get a little more involved?" So we went to a CIY conference. It's a Christ in Youth conference, much like what we would do for youth at the church.
Yep.
And you go, and I'm watching this band play on stage, and in my opinion, I was like, I mean, I'm not impressed, kind of thing. Same time, I was like, this is cool that somebody's doing this as an art,
Yes. Yes.
And so that year, they challenged us, and they said, hey, the world has been taking over the arts. Christians are not claiming that space any longer. What are we doing about that? And I came back from the conference and talked to my group a little bit, talked to the youth pastor at my church who was kind of mentoring me at the time. And I was like, so I was struggle with that. Well, we went back the next year, same kind of calling. And what I had noticed that year was a lot of my friends going into Christian college, and I was working a real job, for Honeywell, money to support my family at the time.
Sure.
I already had 2 kids, and they were young, and we're trying to, get by while I'm thinking my band is going to make it,
Right.
and not. And very much, let me just clarify, very much not making it. Very much not making $100 check for my royalties.
That's
Kenny,
fine.
can I just
yeah.
interject? It would be around that time. I had some friends who were trying to break into the music industry, like what you would have been doing. And they were furious because at that time in life, this is only going to apply to a certain generation. I don't know if Corey, Kristen, you'll understand what I'm saying here. At that time, when they're really trying hard to break into the music industry, who breaks out? It's William Hung on American Idol, who makes it big by being terrible. And it was so infuriating to all of my friends who were actually talented and trying to make it. Did you experience any of that at all, or did you miss that?
Yeah, so we're doing that, and I come back. I go back to the conference again the following summer and they have a call, like an altar call. Yeah. And it's basically this moment, and it was it for me, where I was like,
That's awesome, Kenny.
I surrendered everything. It was like, I don't even know what this means right now.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to leave my job.
Right.
And Christian college. And that's what I did. So I came home, I told my job, who I loved and had lots of good friends, had lots of influence at work, and I loved it. And I told them, I think I have to quit. I think I'm going to college in Orlando, and I'm going to become a minister.
Wow.
Right. Total leap of faith.
Fully supportive. They were fully supportive. I'm like, this is great, And so that's kind of where it started. So I moved to Orlando, the whole family. We started, I'm a freshman in college at 30 years old.
That's fantastic.
So all of my teachers were my peers, basically, and my buddies. Kind of amazing. And I just had a great time at Christian college. It just threw my whole world in a spin,
That's awesome.
Just a great time because I was learning basically that I could do what I love and be telling people about Jesus. So
That's
I wasted no time. Went to college, got right into ministry, started serving at a church that ended up being my first ministry.
Yeah.
And and we hit the road. I had to put a band together. We started traveling. We started doing the thing, but it was a worship team,
That's awesome, Kenny. That's really great.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that adventure, because then your calling took you a completely different place. I mean, talk about how that progressed throughout your life, because I think God uses for things that we never even dreamed of. I think when we put ourselves out there, we come to that place of surrender, God begins opening doors and bringing us fulfillment in ways that we never would have it would never even have crossed our mind.
Right.
Talk to us about that part of the journey for you, Kenny, because you got a great story, man.
I definitely have a part that's like that. As you know, I was a missionary in Cambodia, and you're probably wondering how did that happen, right?
Like, wait, what did we miss? What did we miss?
Yeah. So in college, 2009, I'm a part of it's called International Justice Mission Group that was in our college. It's basically, helping the poor and the oppressed and missions work around the world. They put together a team at our school, and I was one of the lead people in that team. So I was admittedly at the time, I was just like, this is what musicians do. We're cool like Bono. We care about things. I'm going to try and literally, I remember these feelings going on in my mind at the time. But in the process, I learned about human trafficking.
Yeah.
And my daughter, who was 9 years old at the time, I'm thinking this could happen to my child.
Right.
So it led us to an organization called Rafa House that rescues girls out of trafficking in Cambodia.
Yep.
And we happened to be putting a team together to go. And this was a big thing. The school had never done that. And we're like, we're going. So my professor, who was at my college, and myself, we decided we're just going to do this trip, put together however many college students we can. We all went on that first trip with about 15 people and just had our minds kind of blown. Just seeing the love of God kind of activated in Cambodia, and a place that we had heard was just like the poorest of the poor.
Right.
They have nothing. And then we get there and this place has great joy. They also have a huge Christian movement going on. And oh man, it was just exciting. So I came back home from that trip kind of permanently changed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was really kind of how it ended. That was 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many years of your life were you in Cambodia then, Kenny? What did that look like? What was that part of your journey like?
After 2009, I graduated. I moved into my second ministry, which was here in St. Pete. That brought me to St. Pete.
Yeah.
So from there, I just was like, hey, Cambodia is a part of my deal. I told them this from the beginning. And at the time, they didn't support anything related to Cambodia. I said, this is the ministry that I support. It's called Rafa House. We're going to do our thing over there. I'd love to take a team. If that's possible. Of course, they were like, yeah, that's great. It helps the church. It builds the body of the church up. So we put together a team, and I started leading teams every year. So I did that for at least 5 years. 1 year was 2012 when we could not go, and I ended up taking them to Haiti instead.
Mm-hmm.
And, that led to them starting a house in Haiti as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah, just really, really cool stuff. But just watching these people catch that same calling and become a part of that. Right. And then what eventually led us to move to Cambodia was in the process. Sex trafficking is kind of tough because it's a very tough organization for guys to help a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in the process of that, I was always like, what can I do that will help this process of really Christianity in Cambodia is what I got about. And I started realizing they just need ministers, people who are going to be their side, helping the guys and stuff.
Yep.
So that became kind of my calling in life, is like, I want to help in whatever way. And what for me was easy to do was teach music, teach worship leadership.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's do it. So that's kind of what it became. And that's what ended up leading me to move over there.
I love that. So let me ask you this, Kenny. Do you ever think back? Like, I had a similar experience where my calling was, all right, I'm quitting my job and I'm going into ministry. It's a huge leap of faith. And he's like, okay, here we go. Never wanted to be a pastor. Never thought this would happen. Don't know how I'm going to finance my family. We'll see what happens. Right. Do you ever think about that moment, like going back to with that moment where he said, all right, I'm going to my job that I love and I'm telling them I'm quitting to go to Christian college. Like, you ever think what would life look like if you hadn't done that? If you'd said, that's a little scary, I'm going to stay at Honeywell. Have you ever thought about that?
Actually, I think about that one all the time when I'm like, when I came home from Cambodia in COVID time frame and I'm looking at life here again and I'm going, if I would have stayed at Honeywell, I maybe would be getting near retirement now. And friends of mine who are my age, who are like literally retiring age now. Yeah. And I'm going, I'm kind of starting over again.
Oh, man.
Those times, yeah.
Oh,
but the biggest story I have with that's really, really funny was when we were going to college and we had sold our house. We owned a house, sold our house, bought a truck to at least I'll have a vehicle on campus for, the next 4 years. We had a U-Haul truck that had all of our stuff in it. The U-Haul truck, driving U-Haul truck, broke down on the way to Orlando, and we had to have it towed in to the college. So the first day of school, we have all these people kind of greeting us as we're moving into married housing. And here comes the Clampets with the moving truck.
Oh, man.
That's amazing. You can't make that up. That's an amazing story.
That's funny.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love that. And I'm sure you're the same way. You look back at those moments and they're terrifying moments, but those are the moments where you do realize, oh, that's the moment where I said yes to Jesus, like I'm in. And the journey is just fantastic. Like, there's different goals, right? You begin to realize, the different things are important and you got to be a part of something really special.
Yeah, I was just telling somebody, part of my worship team last week, I was sharing this, that, I remember specifically hearing the scripture that none of you will leave wives or families or parents, mothers, children behind, then not do it for my sake. And I remember thinking that moment, and when I was contemplating moving to Cambodia and making that decision, my daughter was 17 years old.
Wow.
And I was literally going, I don't know what's going to happen. What does this mean for her at all? Like for her. And she did not go with us to Cambodia, and move with us. She ended up going to college.
Yes.
And it felt like that sometimes where I was like, hello, is it really worth that?
Oh, right, for sure.
That's a big deal.
That question, for sure. So that's, it can be tough in that regard sometimes where you're
kidding.
Absolutely. Well, Kenny, thanks for taking the time to come on and to share your story with us and just talk about answering that call that God placed on each of our lives and the ability that gives us to start experiencing like fully His purpose. I want to say this again because this is where we started. It's the idea of if I want to find my purpose, it starts with God. It comes more into focus when I seek God. And then I live it out. It comes to fruition when I fully surrender. And I love that. You can see that in your life, Kenny, your journey. And it's so great to have you on the team and be able to call you friend. Thanks for being on the podcast today. It's fantastic. And honestly, I think we're going to start a new trend here.
One more thing.
Yeah.
I texted you after you messaged me yesterday, a guy who we taught with in Cambodia, who he just happens to be here in town this week. And I got to sit and have a meal with him yesterday and us just kind of share how crazy life's been. It just made me think of that. Just how cool it can be. And that's 4 years after the fact.
That's amazing.
He's here now and he's visiting and sharing all the good stuff that's going on at his mission and stuff like that. And I just thought it was really cool.
That's so great, man.
Right. That's cool. Yeah.
And honestly, it's amazing because we get to be a part of that, right? You get to be a part of people's stories and journeys. And you get to see God moving and working. It's fantastic. Yeah. Well, this will be the start of something new maybe, but here's what I'm going to do. It's been such a good thing talking with Kenny. But I think we should just end our podcast with Kenny. And honestly, Kenny, you had such a great sign gesture there that I'd love for you to sign off with that. Let's give it up for Kenny Beers. Give us the symbol. Give us the sign, Kenny. Give it up for Kenny Beers. Thank you for joining Bold Moves. When it is time for you to make your move, be bold. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.